This is CBC Vancouver News.
How many commitments did we have? How many reports do we have? And yet here we are yet again today.
Colby and his family were failed.
The province apologizes for systemic failures that led to the death of a young Indigenous boy in foster care, while BC's child watchdog calls for a sweeping change to the system. Plus,
it's heartbreaking, and so we try to do the best that we can do.
Homeless in the heat, a Kamloops shelter pleads for donations.
Please meet with us.
While Coquitlam asks the province for more help at the only homeless shelter in the Tri-Cities. And
it's a beautiful bottle of BC Rosé.
wine war corked. BC and Alberta reach a deal to let our wineries sell directly to Albertans. Hello, I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. Thanks for joining us. BC's child welfare watchdog is calling for a sweeping overhaul of the province's child welfare system. It comes 3 years after the death of an 11-year-old boy who endured years of abuse along with his younger sister while they were in foster care. And as Katie DeRosa reports, BC's Ministry of Children and Family Development acknowledges the system failed the child and his family.
I want to apologize because it is clear Colby and his family were failed.
BC's Minister of Children and Family Development has apologized for the systemic failures that led to the death of an 11-year-old Indigenous boy while in foster care in 2021.
What happened to him is unimaginable. There are not words for what he endured.
The boy and his younger sister had been violently abused and starved, all of it caught on cameras inside the home. A judge called it a house of horrors. The apology comes in the wake of a scathing report released by BC's Representative for Children and Youth, Jennifer Charlesworth. She's calling for a system-wide overhaul.
If we want better outcomes for children and youth in BC, we can't get there by tinkering in an old system that was based on colonial mental models from the 1950s and 60s, and that has ingrained certain ways of being that are deeply insidious. We have to create anew.
The child's name has not been released, but he's known in the report as Colby, which is a pseudonym. The First Nation where he died is also not being named, only that it's in the Fraser Valley. The president of the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society urged the government to act on this report and not let it sit on the shelf.
How many commitments did we have? How many reports do we have where every minister and every level of government said we commit to do better? And yet here we are yet again today.
Charlesworth called for the province to implement a child and youth well-being action plan. That could include funding for First Nations to take full jurisdiction over their own child welfare cases. Colby's First Nation is in the process of taking over responsibility for child welfare cases. The report found that this transition added an element of confusion and made it unclear who was overseeing the foster parents and who was responsible for vetting the couple, who had a history of violence. The foster parents pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and manslaughter, and last year were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Grace Lore promised the government will begin working on the report's recommendations right away. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
The section of Highway 17 in Surrey is currently closed after a serious collision earlier tonight. It happened around 8:10 at 126th Street. RCMP received reports of a two-vehicle collision between two tractor trailers. Both drivers have been taken to hospital. Currently, Highway 17 is closed east and westbound between Bridgeview and 104th Avenue. And drivers are being warned of significant delays. Investigators are on the scene. Like much of the province, Kamloops is still under a heat warning. And one shelter there says it's getting almost double the amount of people needing its help than it has space for.
It's heartbreaking, and so we try to do the best that we can do. We welcome in everybody over, the amount of 25 beds in for dinner and clothes and a shower, etc. Unfortunately, if we can't find somebody a bed in town at another shelter, we do have to say goodbye at 10 o'clock that night. But it is really hard to exit somebody knowing that they've been slogging it through this heat all day long and not being able to provide more than what we can.
The Kamloops Out of the Cold Shelter Society opens its doors from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. The first 25 people in line get a bed for the night. The shelter says it's now asking for donations of reusable water bottles, hats, summer clothing, and sunscreen to give people some protection from the heat. Meanwhile, city councillors in Coquitlam are urging the province to provide more support amid concerns about a homeless shelter there.
I implore the province, the ministers responsible, please meet with us. Please, let's find a solution forward.
City Council unanimously voted to write letters to the BC government over concerns about a supportive housing facility and nearby homeless encampment on Gordon Avenue. Council made the decision after a new staff report noted safety issues, including open drug use. That facility is the only homeless shelter in the Tri-Cities. The report says last year, fire crews responded to 218 incidents, mainly medical emergencies at the shelter, while RCMP handled over 600 calls in the area. Federal and provincial Conservative politicians are calling supervised consumption sites and overdose prevention sites into question. Those are designed to prevent people from dying by allowing those who use drugs to do so with healthcare staff nearby. But as Liam Britton reports, some are concerned about just how polarizing those sites have become.
They're drug dens. They're drug dens. And they've made everything worse.
The federal opposition leader was full-throated in his denunciation of supervised consumption sites.
What will you do around safe injection sites across the country?
I will be closing them. We will close safe injection sites next to schools, playgrounds, anywhere else that they endanger the public.
The provincial Conservatives also raising concerns later that day, suggesting the sites have a place, but they're not doing enough for long-term recovery.
We want every single one of these sites to be transformed so that they can also be places where people can be guided to proper health care and with intake into things like detox treatment and recovery. So, we actually agree with Pierre Poilievre. I listened to that interview. I think that it's important that we recognize that there have been, terrible things that have been associated with some sites.
Opposition to these sites has sometimes been intense. In Vancouver, one site's operation led to a lawsuit over alleged mismanagement causing distress in the community. In Richmond, protests boiled over at packed council meetings when municipal leaders voted to call for a site, which health officials claimed was never on the table. Sturco says she's hearing of other sites causing problems, including from a Powell River dentist neighboring one site.
People defecating on his property, injecting drugs, ripping up the floorboards of the office's deck because they believe that there was drugs dropped down there.
For his part, the federal immigration minister pushed back on Poilievre's stance.
See, this is a guy who does not care about the parents in question, does not care whether the people that are using these drugs live or die.
He says his party will keep sites open as a general principle, while admitting some, including one in his own Montreal riding, need improvement. BC's Minister for Mental Health and Addictions, Jennifer Whiteside, was not made available for an interview. She said in a statement both harm reduction and treatment options are needed, adding, quote, supervised consumption and overdose prevention sites have and continue to save lives every day, and they also offer low-barrier connections to treatment and other services people need. A political scientist says these sites are shaping up to be a wedge issue in provincial and federal elections expected within the next 18 months.
There's a way of sort of heating up the rhetoric, though, I think, that's been going on that is definitely kind of intentional, I think, as a way of sort of framing us against them in terms of political choices.
Helen Jennings with Mom Stop the Harm has a different perspective on the sites. She lost her two sons, Ryan and Tyler, to drug overdoses. Tyler was using toxic drugs alone.
I think it's a really sad statement of how our politicians feel about this part of our community, that their lives are not worth saving.
Sturco says her party wants to keep the sites away from parks, playgrounds, and schools, and says there needs to be a focus on treatment. Jennings agrees some sites could be moved from inappropriate places, but argues a robust treatment system is a long way away.
So that's what we're trying to do, is keep people alive until we have options of recovery out there for them.
Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The BC-Alberta war over wine has had a cork put in it for now. Premiers David Eby and Premier Daniel Smith have announced a deal that will allow BC wineries to sell directly to Alberta consumers again. As Mira Baines reports, the change comes after Alberta's liquor wholesaler banned direct sales over concerns about tax revenues.
It's a beautiful bottle of BC Rosé from a small winery in the Okanagan, a family-owned winery. So.
A far rosier picture signaling the end of a dispute over BC wine sales directly to drinkers in Alberta.
Albertans who are visiting BC wineries can sign up for wine clubs. Direct-to-consumer shipments to Alberta can start again.
In January, Alberta's Liquor Control Agency banned BC wineries from selling directly to consumers, arguing tax wasn't being paid.
This was just a way in which the markup was not being collected. And we think you need to have fair treatment. If you're going to be selling into our market, you have to be treated the same way as every other person who is buying it through a liquor store.
Smith says Alberta will eventually create a virtual warehouse to collect the markup fee, but for now, it will be on paper. Good news for 327 licensed grape wineries in BC. Some throughout the Okanagan and southern interior have been hit by wildfires, record-breaking heat, and brutal cold snaps that have devastated some crops.
The little guys need these direct-to-consumer sales to keep us in business.
This Penticton winemaker is thankful for a solution, but argues the interprovincial sales system is antiquated.
We should be in the point, click, and buy environment where Canadians can buy our wine and we remit the taxes to the appropriate provinces. Hopefully they get that.
Skinner says his industry has been used as leverage in interprovincial fights before, but for now, it's a sigh of relief.
2023 was a fantastic vintage for the Okanagan. There's lots and lots of wine there that's available. Looking forward to 2024, obviously there are going to be very few grapes and very few wines available.
Still, it's estimated that direct-to-customer sales make up less than 3% of BC wine sales. Most of them are high-end bottles that aren't even available through government channels. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Many parents in Whistler are worried that a popular school and daycare has been told it needs to move by next summer. The school leases a site from the resort municipality, which has now decided to end that agreement. As John Hernandez reports, parents argue the move will deepen the community's mounting childcare crisis.
My fear is that my son will lose access to his early childhood education.
Katie Thompson worries she'll soon lose childcare for her 3-year-old son. He's enrolled at the Whistler Waldorf School, a nonprofit independent school that provides early childcare at about $75 a day and K-12 schooling at about $10,000 a year.
The Waldorf School is a huge contributor to the wellness of families in this community.
200 kids take classes here, and it includes about 50 childcare spaces. But for years, the school has operated in a municipal facility at Spruce Grove Park. Last month, Whistler Council voted to end its lease agreement by June 2025, citing needs for more community space.
This is a park under a Crown lease grant, and so the grant allows us to use it for parks and recreation, and so and this field house is for community use. It's a public facility.
The municipality said it's given the school's leaders years to find an alternative space, but the school's board members say securing the land has been a big challenge.
Demand has grown in this town for all sorts of facilities, and we are amongst that, trying to find our way through that. Our expertise is running a school and daycare, not development, so we need their help to make something happen.
Parents dreading what could happen if their kids lose their schooling or daycare programs.
I think it will be detrimental to his development. We won't have any other option other than to probably find a nanny as we did before.
Childcare is needed here in Whistler, and the decision to remove 50 spots it's just going to heavily impact us.
That's why they're calling on the municipality for more time to find a new home.
I would love us to work together to create a 5-year strategic plan.
The municipality says it plans to stick to its timeline as these parents hold out hope their kids will get to stay here for at least a few more years. John Hernandez, CBC News, Whistler.
A group of people are suing the city of Vancouver over its decision to cut down 160,000 dying trees in Stanley Park. That civil lawsuit claims chopping down the looper moth-infested trees amounts to negligence on behalf of the city. But a forest disease expert says proving the city is negligent might be tough.
I know that they mean well, but I think they're going to have a hard case to make in terms of the negligence. I think, if anything, the city is going over and above to make sure that there's no risks in the future caused by this unfortunate looper outbreak.
The lawsuit claims cutting the trees will ramp up forest fire risks and increase noise in the park. But Hamlin says getting rid of the trees will actually help mitigate fire risks. And while noise is an issue, it will only be so in the short term before the empty gaps in the forest fill up. Well, evacuation orders and alerts have been issued by the Cooks Ferry Indian Band as 2 wildfires burn near Spence's Bridge. People living on the 6 Nicholton Reserve were told to leave their homes this morning. The Tate Creek and Shetland Creek wildfires are putting those homes at risk. Alerts have been issued for Cooks Ferry Reserves 5, 5A, and 19. It comes as heat warnings persist through much of the southern interior. Some areas are expected to hit 40 degrees in the next day or two. And the same weather system could also bring lightning. The Vancouver skyline turned red, white, and green. We'll tell you why after the break. Stay with us. Now to the dramatic flooding in Toronto. At its height, about 170,000 people were without electricity. Specific pockets of the city were hit particularly hard, including the downtown core. Jamie Strachan reports.
In a matter of minutes, parts of Toronto became unrecognizable, hidden by a downpour that suddenly engulfed the streets.
Oh my God! I saw water coming out of, I'm assuming it was a manhole, I'm not sure. And just like a mushroom cloud, if you will, and black water just spewing out.
Underpasses throughout the city quickly filled, stranding drivers.
I mean, we're used to it in England, but this is even more than England, so it's pretty crazy.
The Don Valley Parkway, a key highway running into the downtown core, overrun with water. Toronto Fire forced to rescue more than a dozen people who became trapped in their cars.
This is another extreme weather event. The fortunate and unfortunate thing is this is not the first time this has happened.
With a powerful storm expected and several roads in Toronto prone to flooding, officials were asked why key roadways weren't closed earlier.
We knew that the rain was going to come. Certainly the volumes of rain were beyond what was predicted.
Just outside of the city in Mississauga, police resorting to using boats to search through cars and rescue those who were trapped, including residents of this nursing home. The deluge also quickly paralyzed transit across the Greater Toronto area. Commuter trains were cancelled or severely delayed, parts of the subway shut down. Union Station, Canada's busiest transit hub, looked like a waterfall.
I think it speaks to a bigger problem, though, with the failing infrastructure. You can't just blame climate change. Like, we have to be agile as a city.
Officials also received hundreds of calls about flooded basements. All experts say the result of a perfect storm, capping nearly a week of heavy rainfall.
Those rainfall rates were 50 millimeters per hour. That's almost a month's worth of rain.
Our Jamie Strachan reporting from Toronto. Earlier this evening, Vancouverites got quite the show, a flyover by the Italian Air Force acrobatic team known as the Frecce Tricolori. The Air Force team are on a tour of Canada and the U.S. It started in Quebec in late June and will end in the eastern U.S. in late August. This tour is the first time the group has flown in Canada for more than 30 years, lighting up the skies with red, white, and green. Here's a live shot of Cypress Mountain. Darius will have your full forecast next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Applications are now open for CBC's Indigenous Pathways to Journalism program. This paid 9-month learning and development opportunity supports Indigenous candidates to really hone their skills as storytellers. Indigenous Pathways provides journalism training, career development support, and work experience. Applicants do not require journalism education or experience to apply. Learn more at cbc.ca/pathways.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
And Darius Madavi joins us now for a look at the conditions ahead. Darius, I want to hear about that heat that we've been talking about for several days now, but there's another weather story across the country that is taking up a lot of attention.
Yes, over in Toronto and the surrounding area in Ontario, we saw some serious flooding earlier today. They got more rain in 3 hours than they'd usually do in the entire month of July. So the infrastructure not meant to handle that. There's a highway called the Don Valley Parkway in Toronto that runs right by a river. And honestly, you couldn't tell the difference between the two. That's how much water there was. Cars completely submerged. You can see how much rain passed over that area here in just, so this is looking at a 12-hour period. But if we do zoom in over here, you can see what happened in just a much smaller area in Toronto. So this is just those 3 hours when we saw that serious rainfall come. And if we look at how much rain came in total, you can see it was definitely extreme. Some areas in the Greater Toronto area seeing as much as 135 millimeters of rain. So we're talking some really serious conditions over there. So I think we're going to be hearing about this story for quite a while in the days ahead. This rivals the major flooding that happened about 11 years ago in 2013, July 8th. And that was $1 billion disaster. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But over here in BC, we have our own disasters that are pending. The fire danger remains extremely high. I know this map looks the same as it has for a while, but that's going to be the story for a long time in the future. In terms of those heat warnings, they have spread across BC, and those are all expected to stay in place until at least the end of this week, many of them into next week. So don't expect this map to change anytime soon either. In terms of that smoke, we are seeing it in much of the southern half of the province now, in addition up to the northeast, where we have seen it for quite a while. And in terms of those highs that we're seeing, they are going to climb back up tomorrow, again, by a couple degrees. They're going to come down a little bit in some places Thursday and Friday, but then as we get into Saturday and Sunday, they're going to come right back up. Some places expect to hit 40 degrees once again, even parts of the Okanagan possibly hitting 40 degrees. So it's definitely some serious heat on the way. In terms of conditions across BC, we've got lots of sun still, but also a few of those convective storms that we've been talking about. So we may see some new fire starts. Those winds are expected to pick up Thursday and Friday as well. And in terms of a forecast for here in Vancouver, Goose, Michelle, we've got lots of sunshine.
Extreme conditions right across the country. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
That is your late news for Tuesday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1, and that starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Good night.